Right, okay. The idea behind this webinar is to look at new technologies and developments in the built environment that are hopefully making a positive impact when it comes to climate change, especially in the light of the recent COP26 conference in Glasgow. The format we're going to use is I'll ask a few sort of round-robin type mixed questions with a few sort of questions that are quite sort of specific to certain members of the panel who have a certain expertise in certain areas. And then we'll finish off with a few questions from the audience. So if you've got any questions, please fire them in the sort of chat below. And Alex, who's handling the technical gubbins, will fire them over and we'll try and answer them as best we can, really. So without further ado, let's meet the panel. So starting with you, Neil, as we know each other a little bit, could you give us a quick explanation of your company's innovation and how it sort of disrupts or improves the current building or energy technologies that are about?
Yes. Yeah. Hi, Gary, and hello to everybody who's listening. And thank you for sparing the time. So I'm Neil Spahn. I'm CEO here at Powerwall. And what we've developed is a new type of way to generate energy from the sun, which is ultra low cost, ultra lightweight. And what we're looking to do is bring down some of the barriers to adoption for renewable technologies in the built environment. And I always say a picture paints 1,000 words. So effectively, and not effectively, this is our solar film that we're making in our pilot line up here in the Northeast. And I look forward to talking lots more about it in the rest of this conversation, Gary.
So we're over. And you, Scott, sort of, we just met about 15 minutes ago. So tell us about sort of yourself and your company.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. So my name's Scott Bibby. I'm the Managing Director of CoreHouse. CoreHouse design, build and install innovative modular housing solutions. So we're an offsite manufacturer. We use a hybrid approach. Essentially, we create a pod, which includes the complicated and often problematic part of the build and a panelized wall system. So you think of it as a flat pack, turns up on the back of a wagon and the home's installed. So reducing waste, improving time and quality. We're really flexible as well on our approach, so we can integrate renewables, whichever is best suited to a site.
Good stuff, excellent. And Rosalie, sort of last but definitely not least, tell us about yourselves.
Cheers, Gary. Thank you for having us. Thanks to everyone for finding the time to be here. So I am Rosalie. I'm the co-founder of Thermulon. So in Thermulon, we work with aerogels. Aerogels are highly insulating materials which can be non-combustible. And our work is to completely re-engineer these existing materials to make them way more affordable and broadly accessible in the construction market, especially focusing on retrofitting of existing housing stock and older buildings.
Okay, so and I suppose I'll say what we do a little bit. Obviously, I'm Gary Giles, and what we do is we turn waste polystyrene into effectively sort of building walls and roofs and floors. Some of you may have seen me on Dragon's Den, sort of where we've sort of had quite a good episode sort of last series, and yeah, once again, sort of as we go along, I'm sure everything will sort of come out. So my next question really is, and I'll start with Scott, if that's all right. Obviously, we're all trying to improve on, should we say, sort of current practices that currently go on in a quite conservative industry, should we sort of say with the built environment. So with regards to your sort of selves, starting with Scott, what challenges and resistance, if any, have you faced from the traditional players in your marketplace?
I would say mindset, really. So, yeah. You know, most people seem to be fearful of change. You know, they like what they know, and trying to get people to try something new can be difficult at times. Yeah. For me, it's about consistently delivering and doing what you say you're going to do. If somebody sees it, they can feel it, and you can then convince them, you know, to start adopting these things. You always get your doubters, but it's good to have them because you can transform them into your biggest sort of salespeople in the future. So I would say a mindset.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yourself, Rosalie?
So I will add to the mindset because I agree that mindset is a big challenge. I'm going to say perception of risk. So what I mean by that is we see lots of traditional players being really averse to short-term risk and not really appreciating long-term risks. So by short-term risk, I mean, the risk associated with launching a couple of smaller projects with a highly innovative product and, the risk that it might just not work out or not work out as you expected, and be able to iterate on that. And I see traditional players putting a lot of weight on that risk and actually not appreciating the long-term risk of, failing to transform the business or not being ahead of the curve on sustainability credentials, on, circular credentials of the product and broader environmental credentials.
Yeah. So the likes of a Kingspan it's their sort of marketplace that you're going into. Do you think they're a little bit possibly fearful of you to a certain degree?
Fearful
of the future?
Sorry?
because you are the future, really, your technologies.
We're challengers, right? So we do stir a few pots, and I do think that fearfulness is not the word. I think it's actually just neglecting the impact that in the medium term companies like ourselves will have. And the beauty of working in installation retrofit is there's such a huge need, and the need is so vast that if there's 5, 10, 50 companies with novel installation materials and all of us make it, there's still a lot of room in the market for that. And I do think that traditional players perhaps don't see that way and tend to be very protective of their positions and less keen to actually see the market to grow and to expand, especially, in retrofit. We're retrofitting so much less than we need to. We need to be retrofitting 10 times as much. Yeah,
especially when you have the likes of ground source heat pumps, which obviously are not going to be as, a higher temperature as a traditional sort of gas boiler or sort of electric heating sort of thing. So that's going to be really interesting. And yourself, Neil, same question to you, really,
Yes, happy to pick it up. I would say two things. There's certain in the solar sector, which is obviously the space that we're talking about for Powerwall, there's quite a lot of dogma in the sector insofar that well, they're made in China and that's what it is. And actually there is a lot of resistance to we've seen this before. We've seen this before. It was actually you haven't seen this before. But actually what we find, and I agree with the other panelists, which is basically there are some companies that are just resistant to change, but actually there are other companies who want to try and embrace change, but actually you need the whole, we'll come on to what we talk about, you need the whole sort of life cycle of the built environment to get onto the same agenda. So quite a lot of dogma we encounter, but once we start to explain what we're doing and why it's different, you can, as Scott said, if you keep the message consistent, eventually you can start to change opinions. But it is challenging. And as a small company, one of the other challenges, we're all pretty small companies around this conversation. You don't have the massive marketing machines that some of the other, the sort of incumbents would have. So getting your message across and getting it out there can be a little bit more challenging. So it's good to have forums like this, for example. So
yeah, brilliant. It comes out like that's sort of like a behavioural change sort of thing, because I've always, in my opinion, I've always said it's very, very hard to sort of break individually. I think sometimes you've got to bring together a little bit of a collaboration, if that sort of makes sense, to sort of challenge, to say, okay, right, here's the full package, of a series of improvements or inventions, if you like, and I've also thought, if you sort of combine, say, your sort of installation, Rosalie, with Neil's sort of power sort of development, if you like, it's where it sort of sits in our walls and roofs, and then you sort of give it to Scott and say, right, Scott, there you go, there's some technology, put it together as a building,
Yeah, I completely agree with that, to be honest, Gary. I think our approach is flexible and we will integrate whatever the best material is, as long as the customer wants it. And I am a massive advocate for anything that's going to, help the environment and give benefits, because then it makes our product better by having better products on there.
Yeah.
What I will say with Offsite Construction, and I was quite surprised when I joined the industry, is how much collaboration actually goes on in offsite construction. There's pretty much every organisation is really open, and we don't see each other as competition, which is quite healthy. There's enough room in the market there. There's a massive housing demand. Even if every factory was full, there'd still be demand out there. So rather than seeing each other as threats, we're sharing best practice, testing data from certain materials. We're happy to share that. We're happy to share details and ultimately give the best product to the customer. So the end user's benefiting the most. They're getting the most environmentally friendly home. And I think that's the best way to go forward, is collaboration. And that's the thing I'd encourage the most. If you think about Volvo back in the day when they created the seatbelt, they made the decision to share that with everybody else because it was the right thing to do. And, they're the safest car on the road. And I think if people can do that and share data and best practice, and ultimately we've got a climate challenge ahead of us. It's not a one single organization to try and solve that or profiteer out of. So I think the more we share, the more we'll achieve.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Totally on board with that. Totally on board with that. Here's a question. It's a bit more of a Neil, me and Rosalie sort of question, really. It's around Neil, your area is patented, my area is patented, and yours is in the sort of proprietary process, Rosalie. I think I'm right in sort of saying that. So do you sort of think that is quite critical to the success of your businesses moving forward, the fact that you have some degree of protection, should we sort of say,
Yeah. Do you want me?
You first, Neil, yeah?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up. I mean, yes, we've spent quite a significant amount of summer money protecting the underlying design behind our unique solar film. So we've got something like 20 patent families now granted in over 70 countries around the world. So it's an expensive process, but it's an important process, in particular for our business model, because our business model at Powerwall is to license our technology into other countries. So obviously, to license technology, you're having patented protection behind that is super important. But it also comes with a challenge, because obviously your patents are published. So that means all of your competition and everybody else can get to see what you're doing. And that's where the second level of IP protection comes in, which is actually probably more important than the patents themselves, which is the know-how. So we patent the what, we don't patent the how. So that level of know-how, which it's a bit like the Coca-Cola recipe. You guard that internally, and you only give that to certain parties that you're working very closely with and you're licensing. But it is absolutely critical. And like investors, we'll talk about, the investment journey later, maybe. Yeah. Investors, put quite a bit of, sway into the patented protection of the company. But as I say, it's one level of IP protection. It's important, but it is expensive. I mean, to give you an idea, in Powerwall, we've spent around about £1 million so far putting that portfolio in place. So that is, it's expensive, but we feel entirely necessary.
And critical, yeah. I must admit that's a mind-blowing number. I mean, I thought we spend a lot of money, about 40, about 50,000. So yeah, that's not my number out of the park.
Yes.
Yes. So yourself, Rosalie. So I mean, yours is not patented; it's more like proprietary moving through that process.
Yeah, it's interesting to see just how expensive the journey ahead of us is.
Oh yeah.
So we're at an earlier stage. So our process is still proprietary and held tightly within the company as know-how, and we've not yet patented, but we will. The challenges there, as you say, is how to protect the IP meaningfully so that we can benefit from the huge amount of work that we've put in. While at the same time, the point of coming up with really amazing science, as is happening in all our labs as we speak, is not to keep it under a hood, but to find a way to meaningfully disseminate it as broadly as we can and find a way of meaningful application of our inventions as broadly as we can, while making sure that we as companies benefit from it as well. And I will just very strongly echo, I mean, what I see ahead of us is IP is, the necessary, not sufficient condition for our success, but absolutely necessary to get right. What's the balance of patent and know-how? Because striking that balance right is going to be essential for us. Neil, if I can, maybe I can pick your brains after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
How to balance that. But
yes,
it's a balancing exercise.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's what you're sort of saying there is hitting the nail on the head, because there's a certain degree of, from an investor's point of view, which we'll come on in a little bit, but also investors like to sort of see some sort of protection because they sort of go, okay, so somebody, we've all seen Dragon's Den. The first thing we always sort of say is, well, me and my team could copy this within a week. That's sort of, if people don't have some sort of protection, and I fully get it. But for the longer term journey of the company, sort of having some knowledge that you have some, theoretically, sort of somebody can always improve what you could do. But hopefully, if you've dot the I's across the T's and really done your homework, then hopefully it should build for a better company in some respects. Fully on board with that. My next question, I'm going to go a little bit to one side really, and I'm going to start with Rosalie on this question, and it's about sort of, the question is, sort of, construction is traditionally an older, white, male-dominated industry, and it's a question for Scott and for Rosalie, but I'm going to start with Rosalie first, if that's okay. So what are you sort of doing, or what can be done to make it more inclusive?
So what we're doing is we work twice as hard, because I strongly believe that, one of the ways to make a place more inclusive is to make it more attractive for a more diverse pool of candidates. And for that, you need role models. And to have good role models, you got to build success. And to build success, you have to work hard. And if you have to work harder than perhaps the traditional candidate, just work harder. And I'll add that, each one of us, we're at different positions in our careers. Some, earlier stage. So I know I have the opportunity to be where I'm at, not by myself. There's always someone, lifting you up. So my advice would be what we can do as an industry. If there's someone you can lift up, lift them up.
Good advice, very good advice. And yourself, Scott, sort of obviously sort of in the modular industry. Sort of, I'm used to sort of, my father was a builder. I'm used to sort of going on to building sites when I was, actually going to build sites when I was like 5-6 years old, which wouldn't be allowed these days, and sort of very traditional. So tell me how are you hoping to address that problem?
Yeah, I can echo exactly what you just said. My dad's a builder as well, so I've suffered the child labour abuse that you probably have as well back in the day. Got to do things differently. For me, it's not just about somebody having to try harder. They shouldn't have to try harder. And an employer should try just as hard to attract talent as what the employee should try to get the job. The industry has to change. I value diversity massively. Our team are from all different sectors. You've got to have people thinking differently. So if you had 10 of the same people in one team, then you're missing out on so much potential from others. We've got people from automotive, aerospace, rail, and you often hear them when you're walking through the factory saying things like, why don't we try doing it this way? Have you thought about this? I tried this in a different sector. And it's great, because that's where you get true innovation from and true change, rather than people being in a fixed mindset thinking I've always done it this way. So we're open to absolutely everybody. And I am really, really keen to try and do things differently and attract different people. We've got females in the team. I genuinely don't discriminate regardless, but I think there's always a risk of organisations potentially positively discriminating. If I had 2 people there and one was green and one was yellow, I wouldn't really care. It was whoever would be the best person for the job.
Yeah, totally get you. I don't know if anybody knows this, but I am from the building industry. I won't sort of say who we used to work for. Very, very large sort of building company. Everybody will know them. And I was talking to sort of somebody I used to work with who was eulogising about the fact that in the last 10 years, they've doubled the intake of female site workers. So that's really impressive. That's sort of said, it's gone from 2% to 4%. And I thought, in 10 years, is that impressive? No, I don't think it is. But
you've got to change at the beginning. So we're engaging with schools and colleges everywhere we can. We've got 2 apprentices, one of which is a young lady who's absolutely fantastic. You've got to make it more attractive to others. It was the same. I spent some time in the army, and we had exactly the same problem. It was like, well, why is there no girls applying to join the army? And it's because it's that mindset again. It's that traditional mindset of, well, that's you know, someone should be categorized to do this, someone should be categorized to do that. But I mean, if you ask me to go on a building site today, it's freezing cold here in Seaman, County Durham. You know, it's not that attractive for anybody. But selling something better, or you know, the benefits to it, it has to be a priority. And doing that at a younger age, where you can actually tell people and influence people. You know, this isn't restricted. I don't want to go into a classroom and just talk to the boys in the class. I want to talk to everybody.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I mean, we've done some outreach with schools. We've had some children coming along to see what we're doing, and we've got, you know, some very young scientists who can hopefully inspire the next generation, because you've got to get that feed through. But I actually think that innovation in renewables can be a big enabler for you know, gender equality and diversity of all types going forward. You know, if you think about, you know, making our type of solar panel, or Rosalie's, you know, new type of installation, actually they don't necessarily rely on someone, you know, in a coal mine, which is very heavily, you know, sort of male dominated. So I do think as we go through and make transitions with innovation, I think it's an enabler. It really is an enabler. And what we want to do as Powerwall is not get our stuff over made in China. We want our stuff, you know, made in all the markets where the product's going to be. So creating green jobs, you know, all around the world. So I think innovation can be an enabler. And we'll talk about that a bit later, maybe. So sorry, guys.
Yeah. Sort of. I mean, that's it. Totally on board. I mean, from our sort of side, so you know, obviously, I was the building product, so it was a case of going, okay, right, well, you know, we didn't want to use cement, and we don't have to use cement. That's one of the key things behind it. Okay, can we use waste plastic? Can we make it lighter? Can it still function the same way? And straight away, sort of, my testing bed, should we sort of say, is I give it to my 15-year-old daughter and sort of say, can you build that? You know, that's my test bed, you know, because I believe that sort of, you know, sort of part of what we're doing is breaking down that technical barrier, if you like. Sort of to learn to be a brickie takes you 3 or 4 years to get to any sort of speed. So if we sort of break that down to teaching somebody to do it in half a day, that's the way we want to do it, really, you know. So yeah. Next question really is, it's a little bit of a technical one, really. It's about sort of, you know, about the whole sort of prefabrication. I mean, sort of, it's a little bit of a Scott Neal thing, if this is okay. I'll start with you, first of all, if it's okay, Neil. Just know a little bit about your product and how it goes on to services and what have you. So is prefabrication the way forward, considering the high amount of greenhouse gas emissions there is in the whole building process?
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott's much more the expert on this than I would have to say. So I'll wait to see what Scott's going to say. But if you think about our technology, we see 2 routes for our film, you know, to get it into buildings. Obviously, you've got retrofit. You know, there's a statistic that 80% of all the buildings that are going to be there in 2050 already built. So effectively, you know, we should not forget the retrofit market. And there we would see our film, you know, imagine someone carrying 25 kilowatts or so under their arm, which you can't do with big heavy panels, rolling out on a roof, pushing it down, sticking it to the roof you're away. But actually prefabrication, the other route is getting it integrated into building materials before they arrive on site, whether that's a roofing panel, a cladding panel, you know, whatever that might be. So then you've got green materials coming to site that can be then constructed on site rather than having to retrofit something at a later date. So, you know, we do see that as a huge potential. And we're starting some work with some of the building companies and building materials companies as to how that can be enabled, you know, because that is, we think, a much, you know, it's better, it's easier, it's better for the environment, it's cheaper, you know, so that is a route. I think it's a big route going forward. So yeah, I would fully support it. And as I say, I'm sure Scott can give a much more practical view of the world, given that's the world he lives in. But I think it's an exciting push. Lots of people talk about it. It hasn't yet happened yet, but that requires collaboration. It requires the right certification, you know, because what happens when I put my product with your product? How do they work together? So there's a lot to be done, but yeah, we see that as our vision. Yeah, panels coming with our solar film attached to them, ready to install.
Ready to rock and roll, yeah. Because I mean, obviously, sort of, you will believe prefabrication is the way forward. So, but tell us how you think you're going to sort of do it a little bit, you know.
Yeah, I mean, prefabrication, it's been around, you know, post-war, people associate it too a lot of the time.
Yeah.
We're in a very different time and space now, though, you know, design, materials, technology, people's mindset and how they achieve it.
Yeah.
You've just got to look at other industries. the construction industry is screaming out for something like this, and the time's definitely now. You wouldn't, I don't know, let's say, use a car as an example. You wouldn't buy a car and then just send all of the parts to someone's house or to that street to build it there. It just doesn't really make sense. Plus, you know, if it's the winter, then you don't really want to be outside assembling your car, if you like. So if you use that, then think about that for housing. You know, the amount of delays that you would get in the winter for weather conditions and everything else, you're making the process, you know, you've got more confidence in the process that it's going to go ahead when it is. So you're getting that saving there straight away. Manufacturing environment, engineered approach. You know, you're working with the suppliers to get the boards cut to the size that you want them or manufactured at the size that you want them. So you're taking out the waste there. The way that they're assembled, so many things in manufacturing, it's about time and motion. So you've got just-in-time deliveries, and it's all efficient and effective, where the building sites I've been on in the past, you know, I need to go and get another pack of this, or I need to go and get that. You're forever backwards and forwards, and the skips are filling up with rubbish, and it's just, you know, I don't know what the carbon imprint is exactly on that, but it ain't good. So I think prefab can help out massively.
Yeah, I mean, as you appreciate, I'm totally on board with you. So I mean, obviously, sort of, ours is a building system, you know, and I always sort of, I was doing some research a couple of years ago into the brick. They found the first brick, and it dates from Mesopotamia, 8,000 BC. Okay, and the brick is the same size as it is today. And you go, hang on, in 10,000 years, we haven't been able to really sort of move on from that. Come on, what's sort of, you know? I mean, the phrase I always use for our stuff is, you can't reinvent the wheel, but you can reinvent the wall. You know, and that's what it is. You know, it's just like, it's nuts, you know. So
it is insane. You've got a continuous improvement cycle as well with your engineered approach. So you're always looking at ways to improve things, whereas, you know, traditionally you just sort of do what you know and the job's done and then you walk away type of thing. You don't evaluate the site and sit down with the team and say, what can we do better next time? Why did that take so long? Is there a better material for that? Whereas the environment that we're in, that it breeds that, you know.
Yeah. Totally on board. Right, the next sort of question really, it's a little bit about funding, how the companies have developed or generated the cash really to do what they do. And it's if it's okay, I'm going to ask Neil and Rosalie this one, Scott, and come back to you on a little bit of a different tangent if it's okay. So Neil, I mean, you've been on quite a long journey with Powerwall to get where you are. How did you fund that?
Yeah, I mean, we're probably 9 years into a journey now, and because our chief scientist who invented this technology basically completely reinvented how solar panels are made. There's a lot of R&D that's had to be done, a lot of sort of fundamental science, research, and then development. So for the first, and we've raised, a reasonably substantive amount for the business to date. We've raised about sort of £17 million to get us to this point where we've got a pilot plant and we're starting to make some small scale product. In the early days, we funded it ourselves until we were happy that the science was at least proven to a point. And then we've gone through that sort of reasonably sort of traditional seed funding where you bring in maybe angel investors who are excited about green technologies and what we're doing. And then in our last round, we brought on some venture capital type funding who have different perspectives of the world. But again, and family offices, they want to join us on the journey we're going on. It's a challenge. Like any startup, it's pre-revenue company raising money is not easy. But if you stick to your beliefs in the your vision that you're going to make a significant impact in the world, you'll find the right investors eventually. But as my saying would be, is you've got to kiss a lot of frogs. And we've kissed a lot of frogs along the way, but we've got a great set of investors who are very supportive about what we're doing. But it is as a CEO of a technology startup, funding's never far from the far from the top. But I'm really grateful to our investors and also grant funding. So in terms of support from Innovate and Bays and others, that is great. And actually, Innovate, it's a good thing in the UK. You've just got to learn how to write the bids in the right way that they want to receive them. But so there is support out there, but it's a challenge, but it's an enjoyable challenge eventually.
Got you. And Rosalie, sort of tell us about your journey. I know a little bit about your journey, but I won't say why in a minute, sort of because we've both done crowdfunding. But tell us about your funding journey.
Yeah, so Thermulon has been around for 2 years, and we've actually just closed our late seed round very, very recently on a crowdfunding platform. So similarly, we're a very science-driven company, and we got into a situation where we realized that at the same time, we've managed to secure some support from Innovate UK. Any listeners, don't know Innovate UK, just do seek their support. They are an amazing innovation partner here in the UK, and they do fill a gap for science innovation. And they fill it quite well. And we were in a situation where we've secured funding from Innovate UK and decided that, well, actually, we're at the same time, we'd like to do a little bit more work and do it faster. We wanted to hire more people. We wanted to run more experiments in the next year and a half or 2 years. And at the same time, our company got to a stage where we wanted to get the word out there and start growing a community, start building a stronger online presence. And crowdfunding is just such an amazing way to engage with a really big number of people in a very meaningful way. Mm-hmm. Of course, yes, you're seeking investment, so there's always this motive, but there's the beauty of crowdfunding is there's no such thing as a bad interaction, because everything teaches you something about investors' appetite, about feedback from the market. It's amazing just how informed actually the community is. So we've gotten in touch not only with people who need retrofitting their houses, but building physicists, architects, and it's amazing to see just like how much mobilization and heart, really, for want of a better word, that there is in the community of small investors. And crowdfunding is just a perfect combination of seeking funding as well as building a community of people who believe in what you're doing. And it's I'm really glad we've done it. Which straight over to you, Gary, because you've been through a similar thing now. Yeah,
that's the whole thing. I agree with you wholeheartedly there, because that's what we've gone through. I think our campaigns overlapped. I think a little bit, didn't they? Memory serves. Just the engagement you get from people. All around the world. I don't know about sort of what your numbers look like, but I think we ended up with about 743 investors from 43 countries. You're just going, this is just nuts. It's like and getting lots of really quite pertinent questions, quite very informed questions. It's not for the faint-hearted to a certain degree, I don't think. It's crowdfunding, but for people asking you really direct questions, and if you know your stuff, and you have to sort of go back to them and sort of explain to them and everything else, people get it, and just be totally on board. But yeah. But when I looked at our investors at the end, you're going, there's one guy invested now. I think it's somewhere in the South Pacific. And you go like, how did this guy even hear about what we do? It's nuts, But there you go. So there we go. So just sort of follow on a little bit on that on my company structure, Scott. Obviously sort of OGEL and Thermulon and Powerwall use very traditional limited company type structures, but you're actually a social enterprise. So how did that come about, and how does it work in practice?
Yeah, so the two main shareholders for Core House is a company called Fusion 21. They're a procurement-based organisation, and they're a social enterprise. And our other shareholder is an SME house builder, a regional SME house builder, Homes by Carlton. So Fusion 21, the majority shareholder. Therefore, any profits that we generate, that'll be generated into a social cycle in the areas which we operate. But aside from that, it's sort of written into our values and our strategy, as well as to how we can deliver social value. So we have got our own plans, working with schools, creating job opportunities. We make sure that we use local suppliers wherever we can. So that's how we're a social enterprise. With regards to funding, two main shareholders is who invested initially, but we have had R&D claims and things like that as well that we've submitted, but also we've got great support from Business Durham. So there's the County Durham Growth Fund, when we were actually looking for the factory, it wasn't just about financial, reward that we got there from a grant, but it was also the support that we got with identifying the facility as well. So that was European Development Fund cash that we actually got, and that allowed us to set the factory up and buy more equipment than what we initially planned to, and therefore take on more scope of work from the start.
Right.
Future funding, we've done a hell of a lot in a short space of time. We're actually delivering 4 homes on a site at the moment. I say we, that's the royal we. The team are out there in the cold and in the wind. We've gotten all of our accreditations and everything else, and we've had a hell of a lot of interest from some larger organisations, main contractors, all sort of asking when the next investment will be, or what the interest might be to seek investment. So it's interesting that we've got people sort of knocking out the door, if you like.
Gotcha. Interesting. Right, I'm going to have a bit of a round robin type question here, sort of, and I'll start with Neil on this one, really, if it's okay. Sort of, is it still all about financial cost? I mean, I would argue it's still the dominating factor. And how do you sort of change the hearts and minds of the big players? That's not just financial cost; it's environmental cost. How do you do that? Sort of, can you do that?
I think it's a fair question. Cost economics, clearly are very important, but you have to look at it in a slightly wider sense, because it's not just about the upfront capital cost. You've got to look at the wider cost, as well as then carbon cost, because at some point in the future, carbon is going to become a completely commoditized asset. And at the moment, it's not, so people will refer to it. So I think cost has to be important, and what we're trying to do with Powerwall is bring some of those cost barriers down. But actually, it's not just upfront cost. As I say, it's running cost, it's decommissioning cost, it's recycling cost, and I think there isn't really enough on the life cycle analysis for cost. People tend to look at upfront and, okay, it's 10 pence more to do that, so I'm not going to do it. Actually, okay, let's just look a little bit wider than that, and let's have a bit more of a holistic view. But obviously, clearly with COP26 and the push to keep us to 1.5 degrees, I do think people are looking at slightly wider now perspective than just cost. But ultimately, somebody's got to pay for something. So the question is, how do you, and that's why you need to look over the whole life cycle. How do you get that funding through to do that? And I do think carbon at some point is going to be a part of that equation, because if all of a sudden there's a carbon cost on everything, like there is VAT,
yep,
then that will start to change hearts and minds as to where you make these decisions. But I'm a sort of a capitalist at heart from that perspective, and I do believe you can be a capitalist and an environmentalist. You can do both. You can do good and save carbon, but also generate returns for your investors and everyone through the value chain. But I do think there needs to be a more holistic view of cost than just what does it cost today. That's I would start the conversation on that perspective, Gary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally on board with it. You can make a fair profit. And fair encompasses, sort of responsibility, for want of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
It encompasses that. So, same question for you, really, Rosalie. Sort of that financial cost thing with your products.
Yeah, I got to build on what Neil is saying, because it just rings so strongly with me. The best way to build a sustainable business from an environmental perspective is to build it sustainable financially, which means it's profit generating. In terms of, it's still all about the financial costs. We joke in the company sometimes that, it used to be cost. Now it's cost, and. And at the end, to me, is internalizing the externalities, and our job to shift the hearts and minds is to demonstrate these other benefits, demonstrate how over the entire lifetime of a product it pays to pay the green premium, because sustainable products often are more expensive just by virtue of being smaller, earlier stage. You don't get the benefit from the economies of scale. So there are inventions which are cheaper even up front, but a big chunk of them does have a green premium. What is the value that you get for the green premium? Is it whole carbon value? Is it less need for refurbishment? Is it benefits for tenants, for retrofitting the health implications of having a cold home versus having a warm home, especially in fuel poor households? Putting a value on all of this, having data available to demonstrate the values that a better product brings over its entire lifetime, I think is just absolutely fundamental to shift the hearts and minds and to build sustainable businesses in a sustainable, profitable way.
Yeah. And of course, for you, Scott, sort of, obviously sort of that whole sort of question, that whole financial cost question, that's got to come into play, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Luckily for us, a lot of our potential clients are social housing, housing association types who understand the value of it. And for me, it's why we keep compounding the issue and building stock that is then going to have to be, retrofitted or whatever else is insane, really. So luckily, like I say, most of them are on board and they're saying, yeah, they'd rather spend a little now and rather than spend a lot in the future and compound that issue. And they're obviously thinking about their tenants as well, which is great. So, the fuel poverty thing, it's they think about the running costs and the performance of the home, whereas not all, but in my experience, a lot of sort of traditional, just private sale, they want to build it and then they want to sell it and then they want to forget about it.
Yeah, that's been like sort of, I suppose all our experience to a certain degree once you sort of buy a home in the UK to a certain degree. Yeah, so fully on board with that. I'm conscious of a little bit of time, so I'm going to cut one question and move on to another one. It's okay. So the final sort of 3 questions. Question is, so now they're just settled a bit, how successful do you think COP26 has been in general and for the built environment in particular, if you watched any of the seminars? I'll start with you, if it's okay, Rosalie.
Yes, I'm a big advocate of silver linings. So, it's easy to be very critical of the outcomes of a big negotiation, but I do see the silver linings more. I see big success in the introducing of higher frequencies of ratcheting, and rather than every 5 years having to focus on revising our environmental goals. All the parties need to do that every year. I see that as a big progress point, because having environmental performance at the forefront of everyone's minds, it is just the first step to improving. If it slides to the background, nothing's going to happen. For the built environment, I see the biggest impact actually in the mobilization of companies. There's been an absolute overwhelming, drive towards finding new models of more sustainable businesses. There's been, overwhelming, yet even though still anecdotal evidence of, businesses saying like, okay, we will turn down business if it doesn't ring true with what our beliefs with regards to sustainability and environment are. So I believe that COP has been a huge catalyst for more mushrooming of this anecdotal evidence, and I do hope that it is there's the start of the snowballing effect, where all these anecdotal stories, all these case studies that you get are going to turn actually into something that you can describe statistically into bigger industry trends.
Yeah, gotcha. And what about yourself, Neil? So how do you feel about COP26?
Well, it was interesting. We got the chance to go and present at COP26, so we were actually up there presenting, which was an interesting experience. But that's a one for another story for another day. But I think clearly, I see COPs a bit like board meetings, which is you're bringing everyone together, you're raising awareness, but actually the work is done outside. The work is done in between the COPs, and I think this is it from an awareness perspective. There's a lot more, general awareness of where we are. I think at a strategic, global level, India, they've come out and set a deadline now. And yes, it's 2070. It's later than we would like, but at least I think there is progress. And I think for the built environment, I still think there's a lot more that can be done in the UK and also externally. Maybe we'll come on to that around actually getting some of these ambitions into legislation that can actually drive some change through into the sector. But in terms of, awareness, potential mobilization of capital, and getting people talking about this, I mean, certainly we found, Powerwall, I'm sure the rest of the panelists, there is much more appetite for just understanding what we're doing because of the overall awareness. So, the COPs are never the answer. They're a point of a journey. And I think there was some progress on that journey, 3 steps forward, maybe a 1 step back in a few areas. Coal was disappointing what they're doing with coal in terms of some of the description that came out. But actually, I do think we're taking steps forward. So interesting, although I've never seen so many police in one place at any one point in time as there was in Glasgow. So I don't know what the rest of the country was policed for the rest of those days anyways.
God, yeah. And what about yourself and Scott? Did you have any opinions on the whole COP26?
Yeah. I'm often described by my wife as overly optimistic on things, but you just got to look back at promises undelivered in the past. I do hope that isn't the case now. Yeah. I hope that the world doesn't let us get into a situation where things are irreversible. So I feel like the time has to be now. Really, we've come to that sort of deadline where we've got to do things. And there's been some fantastic things announced, to be honest with you. Let's hope that they're all maintained and monitored and actually carried out. From a personal point of view, I think, it's not just about the government sort of setting, these targets. It's about us, people that are in a position to actually influence things, doing the right thing, trying to encourage, renewables and the right solution for the right building site as well. I was just at Homes UK this week, and the theme was COP26 carbon. Everyone is now asking, what's the carbon credentials? What's the embedded carbon? What's the operational carbon? So that education piece needs to come as well, because a lot of people don't really understand it. So there's got to be a lot done around that. And also there's a risk there, I think, unfortunately, which is always the case. There seems to be experts falling out of the woodwork that weren't there before. And some of them will be when you speak to them, like to this panel now. I'm very, very confident that they know what they're talking about. You speak to some people and they're only 1 or 2 questions deep. You get the sense that they might have done a day's course and then they're claiming to be experts. So you've just got to watch out for those type of people and make sure that that you're getting what you ask for when you're speaking to people, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm fully on board with, I didn't go to Homes this year, funnily enough, but I sort of follow what Neil's sort of saying and follow what everybody's sort of saying, that we are talking points. It's how it percolates over the next 12 months into sort of COP27 and see sort of hopefully what progress is made in that interim period, really, I do think it suffered a little bit with the whole COVID thing, the fact that getting everybody together in one place, it's always going to be difficult when you've got restrictions in place, but hope springs eternal, should we say, brilliant. Right, I'm going to sort of get a little bit light-hearted now, still light-hearted, sort of more promoting other people, really. In my opinion, we've all got brilliant inventions, innovations and processes, but is there anything else that you've seen, innovations, processes, inventions, that you've just looked and went, well, that's a really good idea? What about you, Rosalie?
I've thought about this one, and I still have at least 5 answers in my head. Apart from everything that's carbon negative concrete and steel, I'll use this as an opportunity to point people in the direction of other interesting companies. And what I have in mind is Albotherm right now. So they're also Albotherm. They're a very young company.
I'm writing this down, by the way.
They're working on coatings coatings on glass and currently greenhouses that will become opaque with sun shining on them.
Right.
So they will reduce the heating and cooling demands within a greenhouse, and I see that as a very clever idea. The reason I'm featuring this is opportunity to give someone a shout out, but secondly, anything that can help us smoothen out the peaks in energy demand as we electrify our energy consumption, that always makes me go like, wow, that's a clever one and we need it.
Yeah, that's a good one. And what about yourself then, Scott? Anything that you've seen?
I'm happy to promote all other forms of MMC and improvement, to be honest with you. And I think whatever the best solution is for a specific site is the right solution. Yeah. There's a company based in the northeast actually called Husk Housing, and what they do is they take an existing garage site, they maintain the external shell, and they'll turn it into a bungalow scheme. And there's some really cool stuff that they're doing around that. So a bit of promo there for Husk, but it's a fantastic concept.
I've seen these guys, but it's the old sort of garage blocks that used to be like party cars being flats, that sort of thing, wasn't it? Is that the company?
That's it. Yeah, I mean, instead of just
brilliant idea.
bulldozing it, and then building whatever else on there, they're using the existing shell, and they look quite well. They look quite well as well, to be honest with you. So I think that's probably the most relevant one that I would mention from myself.
Oh, cool. I've written that one down as well. And what about yourself, then, Neil? Anybody give you the wow factor?
Well, there's quite a few. I mean, there's one that's not the coolest thing I've ever seen, because we go and pitch with other companies apart from the people around this table today. The coolest thing I ever saw, it's not for the built environment, was the reforestation using drones. So they got these drones, they're flying through the air, firing sort of bullets into the ground that then sprouted into trees. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. But
Never seen that before.
That was like the coolest thing. We're not really built environment. In the built environment, I mean, we obviously picking up on what Wesley said, is that you've got peaks and troughs in energy management, and there's a lot of stuff coming through on the storage side. And I think there's some pretty clever innovations coming out. There's some companies in the Northeast who are working on storage solutions, as well as the rest of the UK. But you've got people with electric cars. How do you use electric cars to store some energy during periods when you might be generating them in the solar panels? There's a lot of innovation around that, and I think that's pretty cool. But it's going to have to work hard to beat the drone trees. That's not built environment. I've got off topic, but it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. Yeah,
that is a clever idea.
And that's a UK company. That is a UK company.
You'll have to send a link for that.
I can't. I'll have to remember the name. They were the pitch, and
if anybody knows out there and sort of watching the webinar, sort of that intrigues me. That's I must admit, sort of from my sort of perspective, sort of the company I was talking to a few days ago, because obviously sort of our thing is using waste plastic. There's a company called Sphera. I think the sort of Durham type area. Using sort of waste plastic in the construction of I say breeze blocks, because that's the best way to sort of describe them, and using the plastic from the block. That's sort of, because the whole thing with plastic I've always sort of said is, sort of, it's great recycling something, but what's the point in recycling it if it's going to be thrown away again in 3 months' time? You need to get it into such a format that it stays that way for a good, a good 50, 60 years. That's what you should be aiming for, really,
Yeah. It's a small world. They're going to be our neighbours soon next door.
Oh, it
yes.
Ah, right.
Yeah. And Scott's our neighbour down the road. So, the Northeast people, is there innovation in the Northeast? There absolutely is. There's lots of companies innovating up here. And I think, everyone thinks innovation happens in Oxford and Cambridge. Yes, it does, but there's plenty in the Northeast. So we're going to have a nice little cluster in this neck of the woods.
Sounds really good. Really good. Okay, right. I'm going to sort of last question, and before we sort of go to see if there's any Q&A out there. I'm a genie bestowing one wish each to change one thing within the built environment. What is it? I'm going to start with you, Scott.
Transform people's fixed mindset into a growth mindset, please.
Growth mindset, love that. Rosalie?
One wish: comprehensive, transparent, reliable, and fully digitized and searchable system for testing and performance of construction products, including environmental performance. Easy.
Yeah, sounds good. Neil?
I would have mandating renewable technologies in every single building around the world, both existing and new build.
That's brilliant. That's sort of where I sort of come from, really. Sort of, I would sort of make the life cycle absolutely tied in to the financial cost and giving them an equal weighting. So it's that life cycle cost matches in with the financial cost and make them an equal weighting at minimum, sort of into certainly any public building decision. Sort of that would be my thing, really, sort of right. Okay, sort of that's all the questions, really. So I'm going to sort of see if there's any questions out there. So don't forget, anybody who wants to sort of fire over a question, feel free. I'm going to have a quick look and see what there is on the list. Okay, so here's one for Scott. With DFMA and offsite construction, it appears there is a huge casualty dilemma. The big housing developers wanted to build en masse to make best profits and therefore avoid purchasing small amounts. For the smaller companies, they need big orders to grow quicker and enable those bigger orders to be met. If you agree, how do you tackle this?
So I do agree, yeah. I think there's a couple of questions in there as I understand it. So the bit about the volumes with offsite construction, if you look at the traditional build cost to build itself, a lot are slightly more. But if you take into account the full build cycle, you should get a saving on time and therefore get reduced costs. A lot of construction companies are having a little bit of a pilot. So, we'll do 10 offsite homes and then we'll do 50 traditional. So you're not really getting the benefit there. So I think that's why you're not sort of getting that. What would I do to enable that? I'd encourage them to do all or nothing, really. Give 60 offsite homes, providing that the company's performed. But the best way to do that is just to demonstrate what you've done previously. This is what we've done. This is how long it took. Give them confidence, and then hopefully they'll implement offsite fully. With design for manufacture, there's a lot of people throwing it around construction as a buzzword because they're not really familiar with what it is. Some people do, by the way, but a lot don't. For me, if you get manufacturing type people, my experience is rail manufacture, aerospace, as well as construction. And the people I mentioned before are all from manufacturing backgrounds. We truly are designing for manufacture, and that's led by the people. So they're putting these things together, and the cycle's there right through our design team. We tried that, it didn't work. Can we do it a different way? It'll be more serviceable in the future if we install a conduit here and we do this. So that for me, when you explain it to customers, especially if they've got to maintain the housing stock as well, the value design for manufacture a lot more, and you can involve them at the early stages and see what it would be valuable for them as well. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does. I'll tell you what is interesting. Sort of, sort of the power of the internet, or the power of knowledge. Sort of that company's called ARPAS, apparently, Neil. ARPAS, UK drone tree planter.
Might be, yeah. Sounds familiar, yeah.
Sort of just if anybody's interested, hashtag sort of www.arps.uk. ARPAS, .uk. There we go, interesting stuff. The great sort of the last question, which I've sort of come back to it because we sort of half covered it, is somebody sort of said, is there a project that all four of you can work on together? Now, funnily enough, everybody, sort of apart from us four, of course, we did sort of have a little conversation beforehand, and obviously after the call's finished and the webinar's finished, we're going to have a little 10-minute chat or half an hour chat or whatever, sort of to sort of see if that's possible. So there you go. I think that's all questions, really. Unless anybody else finds anything else, but I don't think they have. I should sort of mention that there is a couple of PDFs in there. You want to sort of in the chat. You want to sort of find out more about the companies, and there's something. Follow us to. Apparently, Alex has put something on there saying follow us to continue the conversation. Don't know what that means. Hey, it is what it is. So, on behalf of, I suppose, the moderator, should we sort of say, thanks Neil, thanks Scott, thanks Rosalie, and thanks everybody for watching. And yeah, sort of hope you enjoyed it. Okay.
Thanks Gary.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Thanks Gary. Thanks all.
Yes,
Cheers, everyone.
thank you, everyone.
Bye.